This week's video is going to be a little bit different to the past weeks because I'm not actually going to be showing you any recording tips this time. What we're going to be doing instead is showing you the best things to concentrate on when you're setting up your home studio. So when you're about to start a home studio, there's a few key issues that you need to think about, and some of these are going to be quite practical and some are going to be a bit more philosophical. So I want to talk about how to separate what you need from what you want, utilizing what you already have, prioritizing purchases, and understanding the hidden enemy of the home studio. So let's dive right in. So you need to be able to separate what you actually need from what you think you want. Okay, it's very easy to get carried away trying to plan for every eventuality, and let me just describe to you how I learnt about this the hard way. So the first home studio that I set up was in my late teenage years to early 20s in my parents' spare bedroom, and I ended up buying 2 or 3 interfaces that I chained together that gave me something like 30 or 40 inputs. However, I didn't need that many inputs because the only thing that I could record in those sort of environments were instrument DIs and vocals, maybe the occasional acoustic guitar. I couldn't record electric guitar amps there. I couldn't record drums because it was just too loud. So in most home studios, you're not going to be able to record a full drum kit. And why would I have that many inputs? And why would I buy a load of drum mics? And I even bought like outboard reverbs when I wasn't able to record that. And my thought process at the time was, well, this could be kind of portable and I could take it away and do some recordings on location. And the practical side of this is that in the end, I just hired studios for a day on a dry hire basis and engineered there, and they had their own preamps, they had their own mics, and it was just a waste of money that I didn't need to spend. So you might be surprised how little equipment you actually need to get going. So most home studios will be able to operate with a basic computer, a small audio interface. Now, if I was going back and starting again, I would have started with just a simple 2-channel input and output interface, a digital audio workstation. Now, I use Pro Tools, but any modern DAW is going to be good for the job. And you would want 1 or 2 microphones, okay, and some sort of monitoring. So this, in the most basic form, would be headphones, or if you can get away with it in your space, having some near-field speakers. Obviously, to interface all of this together, you would want a mic stand, some XLR cables, and a pop shield, but that's all you really need to get going. Okay, so one thing that's important is you don't need to go and spend a load of money on some things that you might already have. And a good example of this is a computer. So most of you will already have a computer that is able to record audio sufficiently. And if you have something with an i5 or an i7 processor, at least 4 gig of RAM or 8 plus preferable, a 64-bit operating system, and at least a 1/4 terabyte of hard drive space, you should have enough to be recording audio. Now, what I think is really important here with the whole equipment setup is it's more important to just get going and get started than spending months agonizing over decisions, okay? And as you get more experience, you're going to know exactly what software that you want to use in terms of extra audio plugins. You're going to know what mics that you want to buy for the purposes that you're actually using. But just get a basic setup to begin with so that you know where your gaps are. If you find all the time like, oh, I wish I had a SM57 because I'm recording loads and loads of electric guitars all the time and I want a dynamic mic, well, at least you know where that hole is. If you buy 20 mics and then you only use 2 of them, you could have spent your money elsewhere getting better quality of the few things that you are using day to day, and you would probably be getting better results. Okay, so that leads us neatly onto prioritizing your purchases. So the most important area to spend on your home studio initially is on your interface and monitoring. These are the things to concentrate on because they're the areas that are going to directly change what you're hearing. So concentrate on buying an interface with the lowest number of channels of I/O that you'll need to use day to day. And this should give you the highest quality of interface, because the economics of it are that if two interfaces cost the same amount of money and one has less channels of input and output, the chances are that they've spent more money and more research and development on building this than on one with more channels. Now, obviously, this is just a good guideline, and you should go out and look at reviews and check out different sales and trying to look for the best deal that you can. However, that holds pretty true. And if I had a $1,000 budget, for instance, I would rather spend the majority of that on the monitors and the interface than buying loads and loads of mics. Okay, so as studio monitors go, most of you will want some form of speakers rather than just headphones so that you can hear what's going on. Now, these are a personal preference. However, most of you are going to want to go for some sort of small near-field monitors. Okay, so what these are speakers that are meant to be, a meter or two away from you, and the idea is that they're good in small rooms. If you bought bigger speakers, you might find that they're just too big for the room. By the time that you're driving them up to a reasonable volume, it's just overwhelming. So small near fields, try to go for some that are active models, meaning that the amplifier for the speaker is inside the enclosure itself, rather than having to find a monitor that has a separate amplifier, because not only does that drive up the cost, but you have to do research and try and match the right amp for the right speaker, which can be a bit daunting for a beginner. So go for an active model, okay, and go for something that's appropriate for the size of the room. So you'll find near fields with anywhere between kind of 4 to 5 inch speakers to going up to 6 to 8. So dependent on the size of the room, the bigger the drivers that you can get away with. And we're going to go through a basic budget scenario shortly. So one more thing that I want to mention about near field monitors is that you should go out and try a bunch of them. Okay, so audition different models in a store and take with you some music that has been mixed, some commercial releases that you know inside and out, and listen to how that music that you know really well is represented, and trying to find a monitor that makes that music sound like how it does in your head. Okay, because that's going to give you the best representation and fit your tastes. And the other thing to check is taking in music that hasn't been mixed yet. Okay, so maybe you've just recorded it, do a bounce of it, and just listen to how it sounds, because you want a monitor to draw out the faults of the production or the recording process. If you're playing this rough material and it sounds amazing, when you're mixing, it's not going to make you work hard. So if you can find a speaker that is honest about a music's flaws, but also makes music sound the way like you hear it in your head, that's going to be a good monitor for you. So once you've bought the interface and the monitors, try and spend the remaining budget, apart from the accessories that we've talked about, looking for a good large diaphragm condenser microphone. This is a good all-round mic to use on all sorts of instruments, and then as you get better you can start to branch out into different microphone types for different jobs. But a large diaphragm condenser is a really good all-rounder to start with, because it can be good on guitars, it can be good on vocals, and all of the stuff that you're likely to be using a little bit more often in the home studio. So before we move on to a basic small budget and break down some of the purchases you could make, I want to draw your attention to what I call the hidden enemy of the home studio. So anyone setting up a home studio needs to be aware of the acoustics of the room you choose. Okay, and actually with a modest investment and some DIY, you can create your own acoustic panels which you can hang on the walls and the ceiling that will significantly improve the way that the room sounds, and therefore improve the perception of the sound coming from your speakers. Because what most people just starting out don't realize is just quite how much the speakers are colored by the room environment. Okay, and if you get a choice of rooms that you can choose, try not to go for square rooms, try not to go for such small rooms. So if you have a room that's kind of rectangular in nature and with a good length to it, and that is not too small, that's an ideal place to set up a home studio. So this is a very broad topic that I can't really discuss just in one video like this. So just see the video description for a link to my free home studio acoustics guide. And in the coming weeks, I'm also going to upload a guide like this simply for the basics of setting up your speakers and the kind of 101 of acoustics. Okay, so let's go through an example small budget, and I've budgeted around $1,500 or so to get a full home studio setup. And this is not the cheapest you could go. You could, for under $500 or so, get something usable. However, this is the kind of setup that I would think that would last you a long time without wanting to upgrade anything. Okay, so in terms of a computer, I'm suggesting to just use whatever you already have, because the computer will run up a large amount of cost initially, and most likely you already have something that's good enough to do the job. So a lot of you that are interested in music production might have a MacBook laptop, for instance, or a Windows desktop that will have the specs that you need to get going. In terms of an interface, I'm recommending the Audient ID14, and this is just a 2-in, 2-out interface, and it has 2 channels of preamp. It has a headphone output on the front and a DI input on the front. Okay, but one of the great things about this as well is that it has an optical input, which means that if you wanted to buy a separate rack-mounted preamp, you could plug that in digitally with a optical light pipe cable, and that will give you up to 8 more inputs on this interface. So you can go at a later date and pick up some sort of extra preamp that works digitally with the optical cable, and you'll then increase your channel count to 10. So it's a great way to just kind of upgrade. And any of these smaller interfaces that have optical inputs are great for that, and you don't have to go out and buy a new interface. And I really like the sound of this interface, and actually you're hearing it right now. I'm using this to do this video. Okay, and in terms of a DAW, I'm suggesting Logic Pro X. And the reason for this, and I'm a Pro Tools user day to day, however, if you're just getting started, Logic Pro has lots and lots of plugins ready to go built into it, from audio effects like compressors and EQs, reverbs, but it also has lots and lots of loops pre-built in, and it also has lots and lots of software instruments, so synthesizers, drum machines, and it just is really easy to get started with. And whilst I prefer the audio editing and mixing in Pro Tools, for composition and arrangement and having lots of things out of the box, I don't think that there's anything better than Logic. So in terms of monitors, I've gone for the Yamaha HS7s. I like these because they are solid enclosure, they're active, and I just like the sound of these. They're very honest. Okay, they don't have the best low-end response, but they're very, very revealing, and I like that in monitors. And they're not a million miles removed from the old NS10s either. Okay, so for headphones, I've recommended the Audio-Technica M50Xs, which you can get for around $150. And these are just great all-round headphones. So they're closed back, which means that the speaker cones themselves, once they're on your head, they don't expose the sound to the outside air. So at the moment, I'm using some HD 650s by Sennheiser, and you'll probably see on the video here that they have grills on the front which lets air out, and because air is let out, it can also let sound out. Headphones are good for mixing, but they're not so great for recording. So for when you're recording, you want closed back to stop any bleed, but you also want something that's reliable and fairly affordable, and that's what the Audio-Technicas are. And in terms of a microphone, we've gone for a basic large diaphragm condenser, and this is the Aston Origin. And I think that this is the best bang for buck microphone out there at the moment. I actually did a review for this on the Gearslets reviews team a few years ago, and I absolutely loved it. And whilst it's not my favorite mic in my arsenal in my studio, it still gets used very, very often because it's just such a great all-rounder. And then we need to think about some accessories. So in terms of furniture, try to use your existing desk for your computer and your chair. and spend $20 odd on some XLR leads and some speaker leads if you need them to connect your microphone to your interface, and also go from your interface to your speakers. And then you'll need some sort of pop filter for the microphone, and that will stop the P's and the S's and the plosive sounds getting into the microphone so clearly. You'll need a microphone stand, and you'll need some stands for the monitors. Now, whilst these are fairly cheap, and the whole of this costs under $100, if you do have the budget, try to go for more expensive mic stands, because they're going to be a bit more sturdy, and try to go for better monitor stands that are more isolated from the floor. But again, when you're getting started, it's just better to get started and incrementally upgrade those accessories if you need to. Okay, so let's move on to if you have a bit more budget and what I would buy, because it's a mistake, like I mentioned earlier, to try and do everything initially. What's the point in getting a cheaper interface and buying 20 microphones when you're not likely to use them at one time? So what I would recommend, again, is to concentrate on your interface and your monitors, and also your room treatment, which we'll talk about in another video. And if you can afford a better interface, get one with a smaller channel count again, and improve the quality of those channels that you do have. So as an example, here's this Prism Lyra. Again, only has a couple of inputs and a couple of outputs, but they're super high quality, and you'll notice a significant difference from cheaper interfaces to an interface like this. And then in terms of monitoring, monitors can get very expensive, and my dream monitors are the ATC SEM25s, and these can cost you up to about $8,000. So you can see how even just on a basic setup with just one or two inputs, you can be spending a lot more money if you have it. Okay, and in the mic territory, a good all-rounder cardioid condenser would be the Neumann U87, and that's going to cost you over $3,000. So you can see, even if you have a bit of budget, you can spend this on premium equipment and just get the same sort of things, but just on a higher level. And then you can start from there to roll that out into more things once you're getting better. So for instance, one of the first things that, if I was to start again, if I'd bought the Lyra and the monitors and treated the room a bit, I would start to get a couple of extra microphones. So I might get a Royer 121 ribbon mic, and I might get a Shure SM7 dynamic mic, and I might also go for some sort of tube condenser like the Flea 47. All of these are very premium products, and I wouldn't go out and buy 10 different mics. Okay, I would buy them one at a time, incrementally improving it with the best stuff that I can buy. Okay, and I would also then start thinking about making a really premium input channel for what I'm using. So I would use a line input on the Lyra, and I might buy some outboard. So I might buy a Neve 1073 preamp with an EQ, because that's a phenomenal all-rounder preamp that sounds beautiful, and the EQ is very usable too. And then I might think about getting a couple of hardware compressors. Okay, and something like a Warm Audio LA2A model, or a Universal Audio 1176 are good all-round compressors to get started with. Now, you may have also noticed that I haven't talked about any software here. There are loads and loads of ways where you can incrementally improve your studio, but just concentrate on those very basics first. Okay, and as you're improving, buy things one at a time. Okay, and don't go into debt to buy things. Okay, buy things one at a time, and buy the best things you can, and save up. And trust me, it's well worth it, because what I did was try and do everything initially, bought low to mid-level equipment, and I ended up selling it within a couple of years, and I had more difficulty trying to find buyers for that cheaper stuff on the used market. They depreciated more, and they were harder to get rid of. So I found that when you buy premium stuff, not only do they hold their value, but they're easier to sell too. So there are multiple reasons why just incrementally improving with the best stuff is the best way to go. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please keep a lookout for that acoustic setup guide that should be coming in the next week or two. And on my site, there is the guide to acoustics that you can get. I'll put the link for that in the description. And also check out my other 101 guide. So I've got some guides on digital metering, which I'll put up in an info card, and I've got some other videos that I think that you'll get some value out of. So see you again soon.